Hi, everybody, and welcome again to the JSA Spotlight Sit-Down Series. I'm Jon Sheppard. Joining us today is Gordon Coyle, CEO of the Coyle Group, a business insurance brokerage firm here in the New York area. Welcome, Gordon.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Coyle Group and how we got to this point in time.
Sure. So the Coyle Group was founded in 1929 by my grandfather and his brother.
I was going to say, you don't look that old.
Yeah.
Okay?
The years have been kind to me.
Very much so.
And it was in my hometown of New City where the business was started, and it's still in the same town. And across the street from where it was founded, my grandfather bought the building in 1931, and I still sit in that building today every day.
Wow.
The rest of my team is virtual, but it started off as a very traditional insurance agency and actually had a real estate agency as well. And my grandfather and his brother grew that company, and then my father and his cousin entered the business in the late 50s, early 60s. I entered the business out of college in 82, and my uncle retired, and then my dad retired 4 years later. So I was running an agency. I wasn't yet 30, and when I reflect back on it, I often think to myself, I wish I had more mentorship, but at the end of the day, everything worked out.
Yeah, sometimes trial by fire.
Exactly.
It happens to all of us. I too started at a young age, so I know what that's about. Tell us a little bit about the services you guys provide, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So a little bit of a different agency than most insurance agencies, where we only do commercial, property casualty insurance. We don't do home and auto. We don't do life insurance. We don't do benefits. So having that very narrow focus in commercial property casualty, I think gives us an advantage where that's what we eat, sleep, breathe. That's how we live every day. And over the years, I've accumulated 4 professional designations. My team everybody on the team has at least 20 to 30 years experience. So we've got a pretty good experience level, expertise, and really depth of knowledge that I think helps separate us from most other agencies today.
Yeah, it helps you navigate clients with specific needs and actually with unique needs.
Yeah.
That's something that, I've talked a lot about. You got to be a subject matter expert, for no doubt, but you also have to know the nuances of what you do. And, not every business is the same. And, there are probably 17 shades of gray, in your world.
Yeah. In fact, thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I thought one of the things that you quickly realize in this business is that every business is unique. You could have 2 plumbers, 2 hedge fund managers, 2 whatever, and they're not similar. They have some similarities, but they're different, and they have different needs. And they have different ways they want to be communicated with. They want to have different relationships. And after so many years in the business, I've kind of learned all those nuances that you mentioned.
Yeah, people look for that. We were talking off camera earlier about people finding you online and with some of the social media stuff you're doing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's very interesting how they view you as whether it's from that new medium of online or the old medium of getting to know you through referral or finding you in other ways. You're a trusted advisor.
Right. And
that's really what they're paying for when they come to you.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that trusted advisor role is super important. The business world is changing, and it's getting younger, it's getting more diverse. You're seeing industries existing now that when your father and your grandfather were running the business didn't exist.
Right.
Talk to us about the types of businesses that seek you out.
So our client base is incredibly diverse. So we do a lot in the technology space. We do a lot in the financial services space. So private equity, hedge funds, investment funds, private funds, that's that space. I had a call with a couple of people. One was in Uzbekistan and the other one was in Canada.
Interesting.
And they were creating an investment advisory company that was focused on Muslims and the halal and Sharia law that Muslims have to subscribe to in their investing. I was like,
that's new.
That's new. That's different. But I guess the point of bringing it up is what a learning experience that was for me. And you have to be just kind of open-minded to be tell me more about it. Why is that? And I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about what I do every day. And in the same day, I could have been speaking to them. I could have been speaking to a large client of ours down in Houston that's a renewable energy contractor that's installing gazillions of these huge batteries to offload power from the grid. So that's a learning opportunity.
Sure.
And while I may know a little bit about everything, being able to interpret what the client does and then ask them the right questions to learn more, I think makes my life really interesting. And I love going to work every day. Talking about it earlier, I'm 64, so I don't really have any solid plans to retire just yet. I think I've got 5 or 6 more good years at least. And if it continues to be as interesting and exciting and learning ability every day down the road, I see no reason to really give it up.
No, you just keep going.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're the same age, and he looks so much better than me. But I share that very much. When you have an opportunity to learn something new, in the service that you provide, it's really goes a long way toward keeping you energized, keeping you interested, and it does motivate you to learn new things, to become well versed in new things. One of the things I've been joking with people that I call you my rabbi on, when it comes to social media, because I'm trying to create my own little presence, and you've done a great job in that. And talk to me a little bit about, as somebody of your generation, dipping their toe in the pool and then basically diving all the way in, how social media and all of that is impacting the Coyle Group.
So I'll give you a mini story that takes just a minute. It was right around the beginning of COVID that a friend of mine who I had just started having like weekly calls with, who had been doing video, who owned an insurance agency, who's 20 years younger than me, said, and I remember the words clearly, he said, "Dude," and the reason I remember that is because nobody calls me dude. He says, "Dude, you got to be doing video." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "With your knowledge and how you explain things to me, you're a natural. You should be doing video." And I'm like, "But why?" People are looking for what you have. That's what they're looking for. I'm like, where are they looking for it? So it kind of gives you an idea of like how well versed I was on social and video. And he goes, "They're looking on YouTube." I'm like, get out of here. Like, they're looking for insurance agents. Now, they're not looking for insurance agents or brokers. They're looking for solutions to the problems they have. And if you answer those questions, they're going to call you. I was really skeptical. But I said, it's just the beginning of COVID. I'm thinking, what do I got to lose?
Little project.
I'm not going to any networking meetings in Manhattan. So
might as well do something.
Exactly.
Right.
So I had a good camera. I had a good tripod. I bought a light, bought a backdrop, and set it up in my office and started doing it. And there's an expression I think we've shared, and that is that you go from cringe-worthy to binge-worthy. I don't think any of my videos are binge-worthy, but the first ones were really cringe-worthy. But it got me started, and I kept doing it. I was doing a couple of them a week. I was interviewing guys in our group, doing things like this on Zoom, and it gave me an opportunity to, showcase other people's abilities and what they were doing, as well as have conversations online, which turned out to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
6 months later, I'm doing it. I'm like, phone's not ringing. Like, what's going on here? And sure enough, like the first call came in. I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that just continued to snowball and get better and better and better. And today, I don't measure it as well as I should, but I would say on average, we get somewhere between 10 to 25 inquiries a week.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Some of them are good. Some of them are too small for us, but it's great.
You're out there and you're creating a presence. I've been doing it in my business, in the recruiting and advisory space, and leaned on you for a lot of suggestions. And between you and the man behind the camera here, my assistant Vito, I've been kind of, working my way through it. And I think all the time about some of the things you've said to me about, we'll get sales leads from it. They're not all right for us. In my world, I'm starting to get a little bit of a reputation, and I see the value in it, and I see how it's transformed what I do. And, I think it's, old dogs like us, it's not a new trick, it's just a trick. And at the end of the day, if you can take the things that people are doing today, you're not cringeworthy, you're not binge-worthy, but you are somebody that they respect. And
you're relevant.
Yeah, totally 100% relevant. Yeah. And I think that's something that anybody listening to this channel of any age can understand, that you can create your business to run the way you want and pepper in these things for the next generation. You went from your grandfather's business to your father's to yours, and the business will go on through the years. And this is just the latest chapter of it.
Yeah.
So who does your ideal client look like?
Ideal clients, like really great clients for us, are employers with 25 or more employees in just about every industry vertical. We don't do a lot in the construction industry because it's so difficult here in New York. But we do a lot of importers, a lot of distributors, manufacturers. We do several very nice high-end retailers that have 5 to 15 locations around the country. Just, it's a mixed bag. I mentioned financial services and technology. That's a big sector for us. I think especially because a lot of those buyers are younger buyers, and they get all their information from Google and YouTube. And now we've got to figure out how do we get rankings on GPT and other large language models. But they're more adept at, rather than asking a peer or another professional, where should I get business insurance? They go right online and they do it. And what I find interesting is that some of these buyers may have already contacted a direct seller or a big insurance company, and they've had a miserable experience, and they're more than happy to complain about it to me, which I love hearing about. Yeah. And then I explain how we do business, and they're like, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, they're looking for that hands-on, that personal touch. You say, when you talk about industries, you're not industry, you are industry agnostic. Yeah, right? Pretty much. But at the end of the day, what do people want? They want a high-touch service. Yeah. That's really, and that doesn't change between, we talk a lot about the generationality of work on my channel and how the 4 generations working together all have different views. And one of the things I see in consumers of goods and services is different buying styles. And you just laid them out. Somebody of a previous generation would, want an in-person visit. Yep. With Gordon Coyle, to hear about the products, to hear about property and casualty, to go through the 55 things to get down into the silo of buying. And whereas somebody who's running a business now, who's of a younger generation, they get their information online. But what wins them over is the personal touch. Yeah. And that never changes. And that's one of the things I think that we both see as we engage in our businesses in the marketplace today. Yeah. I think the other factor that I touch on quite a bit is that video delivers trust. And trust, there was a book, Selling at the Speed of Trust or something like that. And it was, every sale in every industry, your buyer has to trust you. And that's what they're looking for. In my business, they're looking for somebody that's an expert at what they do. They know that they've got the client's back and they trust you. And video just seems to impart that level of trust that you don't need to make the sale. There's no closing. I don't have to close a deal. The conversation is very natural. It's like, yeah, I can help you. Do you want to do that? Oh, yeah. So that's what I find amazing about video and how it opens the door, and there's no real friction anymore to that sale. There's no defenses being put up. They need something. They're convinced that you can help them, and it gets done. Yeah, one of the things we were talking about off camera before we started was how the old sales model and how sales reps that work for you are now moving into the digital age, right? And there's a perfect example, right? They can build trust, but they have the digital tools at their disposal to get leads, to close deals, to get better information for their potential clients. And it's all constantly changing. Yeah. And that's a challenge. I mean, I find it challenging to stay up with all of the, new modern changes with AI. There's a lot of AI that can be put into the marketing side of our business, but there's also a lot of AI that can be put into the servicing side. And, I've kind of come back to my team and said, hey, what about plugging in this AI to take care of, back end stuff, not client facing? And they're resistant. And they're like, but if we're like a high touch, white glove service organization, why are we going to offload this to AI? I have a varying, sense of that it's a much more efficient way to do back-end paperwork. But I just find it interesting how my team kind of sees that, and it's like they're not threatened by it, but I think that they're kind of like wary of it. Like, is it going to be good for the client?
Yeah, I think 3 years from now, that won't be the case.
Yeah.
You know, the AI will have entrenched itself in every business. Like everything else, and we've talked about this, it's a tool. You know, it's a tool to provide better service to your customers. And that's really the thing I think that your team or anybody else is going to understand over time. You know, right now it's all brand new. You know, in the law firm space, I have a number of firms that have reached out to me and calling me things like the attorney whisperer, because I talk about the generations. And they talk about the younger generations now and how they don't want to come to work, they want to do work in their living room. And my message to all of those people is, all the work you're doing now that you think like you have the upper hand with, AI is going to come along and take that work in 18 months. So you need to get into the office to kind of get the high touch with your firm. And it's no different from what your people are saying to you. They'll use it as a tool going forward, and they'll get more comfortable with it over time.
Yeah.
I think that'll be the case. You know, salespeople that work for you, it'll be just like any salesperson in any other era. If a customer or a potential customer likes and trusts you, you'll get their business.
Right.
Doesn't matter what tools you have.
Yep.
So can you talk to us about any trends you're seeing lately or going forward?
I think the trend that we see, we kind of touched on it earlier, is the reliance on a lot of decision makers or the people that work for the decision makers to get all their answers online. The traditional channels of gaining new knowledge is you're not calling up your accountant or your attorney or your other expert. People are going online. I had an experience with an investment firm in California 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and this young woman had, like, she asked all the questions that I thought, like, am I getting quizzed? Am I getting tested here?
Because if it's on camera and I'm getting quizzed, I want to score high.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But clearly she had done her research. And with the advent of AI, GPT, Claude, those answers can be, I think, much more easily refined and understood to the user. So technical insurance language, if you ask the right question, you can learn about it on AI. Now, do you understand what that means? No, she had to still ask me about, well, what does that really mean? Which is great.
Because that's when you knew you were passing the test.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. But I guess the point is the trend that I see is that buyer habits are changing. If I was a traditional insurance broker trying to get into major accounts, that would mean a lot of hours of cold calling, a lot of rejection. I'm not cut out for that. I don't know if I'm too old for it, but I just sucked at it even when I was younger. But I think that for the traditional insurance broker who thinks that's the only way you can get business, I think they're missing the boat, and they're seeing the buying habits change. Because, you know, we mentioned our age. We just think all buyers are our age. But the fact of the matter is that there's a generation earlier than ours, or two, that are buyers. They're business owners. They're people in their late 20s, their early 30s, their 40s. Those are people that institutionally think keyboard, Google, GPT first, humans second. So that whole buying dynamic changes. So as a trend, I think not only in the insurance business, but I think in any sales organization, that's probably the biggest challenge that they're going to have to overcome.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. I'm seeing it in my business too. You know, they go to the keyboard first and the person second. You know, it seems to be happening. So where can people find you?
Everywhere.
Obviously, he is everywhere. That's why I call him the rabbi.
So if you go on LinkedIn and look for Gordon Coyle, you'll find me there. If you put in the Coyle Group, you'll find me on YouTube and other social channels. Or if you want, I'll give you my email address.
Please, go ahead.
GBcoyle@thecoylegroup.com.
That'll get you right to him, and he does return every email very promptly. I will say that.
Thank you.
Gordon, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
It was great to have you.
Thanks for having me. All right, John.
All right, thanks.